Welcome to Scrap Farm, the newsletter / podcast where I discuss living seasonally, adapting to climate chaos, and how to make jam, all in the context of trying to start a farm. Possibly in the UK, but at this point, who knows? If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. The next few weeks are likely to be less farm-centric and will harken back to my older writings on this newsletter, writings on weeds and forageables and pagan festivals and the ever-turning wheel of the year. To those returning, also hi. When it comes to farm updates, my partner and I are more or less where we were last week. That is, stuck in the itchy indecision, or not even indecision, but in having to keep our options open. I've applied for countless jobs and been rejected from quite a few. We have, however, submitted our US business plan to see if we qualify for a USDA loan on the property that we toured back in October. Thinking about that land now seems like a lifetime ago. Thinking about the land that we toured in the UK also seems very far away. As always, being in the UK hinges on me getting a well-paid job and how long we can hold out and wait for that. And being in the US hinges on whether or not we qualify for a land loan. So lots of hinges. Such a liminal time. I also listened recently to a podcast that's linked in the notes. And for once I felt like the business plan we'd drawn up might not be as bad as we think. Or at least we haven't forgotten any of the easily forgotten expenses of running a farm. But I'm sure there will be others. In theory. Some actual news is that I passed my UK theory test at 29 years old. What a marvel. For those of you who wonder how it got this far, I grew up in London and I had no need to drive until I started living in the US at 25. I would also like to say that I got my American license in 1 week in New Orleans. I drove my instructor on her errands to shop for her daughter's birthday and to pick up coffee. My theory section was that in 8 hours in a room where I was the only person who hadn't been driving for years already. Everyone else had got caught driving without a license, and so the course for them was actually mandatory. I spent a week dodging drunk tourists, potholes and horse manure, and then suddenly I was just allowed to drive. Even then, I hadn't really needed to drive. I got confident with driving in the last couple of years, and my partner is a saint for surviving that long and for trusting me with his manual cars. Compared to the paper multiple choice questions and a 10-minute drive around the block that got me a Louisiana license, the UK system is quite severe. The US is actually one of the only countries where the driver's licenses aren't convertible to the UK, and I wonder why. It's actually because each state has different regulations, so they can't be sure that everyone's a good driver. Spotty driving history aside, I was more than apprehensive about the theory test, for which I had crammed via app for about 3 weeks. Turning out my pockets, and I dropped some hawthorn seeds on the carpet, panic clicking on a pile of leaves in the hazard perception test, I was pretty sure I was going to fail. But no, passed. I'm now working on getting a couple of lessons to prepare for the practical test. This might not seem like big news, but when it comes to insurance and the ease of movement, having a UK licence was a bit of a stumbling block for our plans to farm here. It seems really hopeful that I've passed. It feels like actually moving in any direction, quite literally taking the wheel. Old frames. Another tiny life update is a superficial one, but in it being so, it's given me plenty to muse on, to chew on like gristle. It began because I needed to get new lenses for my glasses. The last time I got new glasses was 7 years ago, and they were free because I was a student in Scotland. In that moment, I saw the world for the first time. I got contact lenses. Up until this point, I'd been walking around in a very stubborn blur, and the joy of seeing every single leaf and making eye contact with ease and communicating so much better has yet to wear off. But saying that, I do love my glasses, the frames at least, and not least because they make me look kind of hot. But that's not the point of all this. The point is that the new lenses and old frames cost more than buying 2 new sets of glasses. It was that the sales assistant was unsurprisingly very pushy, and more annoyingly, the frames I could choose from, but refused to, were visibly lower quality than the ones that had survived 7 years on my face. But unfortunately for Specsavers, I am persistent, and some would say contrary. The interaction, the insistence on the new, worse. The prohibitive cost of reusing made me pretty fuming. It got me thinking about the right to repair in Europe, which of course Brexit has hand to hand in scuppering here in the UK. And if a struggle to fix something as small as a pair of glasses, if we're struggling to fix something as small as a pair of glasses, think of all the tangled, entrenched systems and thought patterns that are bogging down our food system, our carceral system, our healthcare system. Yes, it's glasses. It's not that deep, but I'm a poet and a drama queen, so it is that deep. Speaking of which, I loved Danielle Urban's Front Porch Threads and the beginning of their series on visible mending, along with the Restart projects, which helps to support the right to the repair. I think a lot of people are doing interesting stuff around repair, just not Specsavers. Spiced plum jam. Since there's not much to report on farm-wise, I will instead be reporting on how I'm filling my days. Now the jet lag has worn off, I'm diving headfirst into the joys of the season. I've been overloading on festive podcasts, from quick almanacs to traditional songs to deep dives into the various aspects of Yule. You'll find these resources dotted throughout the newsletter if you're interested. One of my favourite activities of the past week, between passing my theory test, countless cover letters, and beta reading a friend's book, has been making plum jam. We just polished off my mum's damson jam. Damsons are a small subspecies of plum, native to Great Britain, but found across Europe. They have a bright, somewhat puckering flavour and make a fantastic jam. When I was growing up, a damson tree overhung my grandmother's front garden, and each year she and my aunt would make jam from its abundance and dole it out to the rest of the family. It's a flavour so linked to her and her overflowing garden, to her kitchen table Britishness. My grandmother's death towards the end of 2020 spurred me to quit my stable job and pursue farming. She had encouraged me in my love of plants, of food, and the loss of her was a catalyst, a flame under the lingering feelings the pandemic had brought on. 4 years later, and fresh in the loss of my other grandmother, I am still sentimental for that stony fruit. The conversation my mum and I had about jam making was spurred on by Philazine arriving in the post. The 8th issue, the one I'm published in, focuses on the kitchen, a place I could go on about for hours. My piece wove in my emotional connections to damsons, to loss of place, to storing food for the long winter ahead. Titled Preservation, aimed at capturing a moment comes memory, food was energy. I like to avoid turning into one of those stories where you just scroll through one story to basically. I won't promise this is also, but story side, this is close to March and no longer season set of plums. To make jam, stew ice pounds about % of the water, 800 plus 80 mils of water. Once they began to soften but not fall apart, I added an equal weight of preserving sugar, so equal to the weight of the plums. And then I brought the heat down low. Honestly, I think I could have done with a lot less sugar, but I've yet really to deviate from recipes for things that are long storage goods. Jam is very scary at first. At this point, I also added lemon juice, cinnamon, and a hint of black pepper. As I stirred the mixture to dissolve the sugar, it took on this glossy, vibrant texture, and I dreamt of painting my imaginary living room walls that colour, of offsetting it with creams and brusque oranges. And once the sugar dissolved, I cranked the heat. Watched the rolling boil turn the liquid bubbly and viscous. I should have boiled it for longer, and I am no longer listening to recipe times because I am becoming ungovernable. A little earlier than necessary, I scooped it into oven sterilised jars and left them in the frigid kitchen to cool overnight. To me, and my mother apparently, jam making has always seemed like a complex and difficult art, but now I've made an okay-ish jam, I would say that it isn't as mystical and daunting as I first thought. If anything, I now want to experiment more. I want to take away the fear of the recipe, though botulism is a real worry and there needs to be enough sugar in your jams, but I don't actually worry about that as much anymore. There is space to experiment, and I will let you know how it goes. Bye.